Good morning. Today is Thursday, August 7th, 2025. Daniel Gordis perfectly captures how I feel these days. He wrote, "There are times in Israel when I think it's important to try to keep our eye on two different balls. One is what's happening in the country in terms of the war, most critically the hostages and politics and the stuff that keeps the newspapers busy. That's one ball. But there's also a second ball." He writes, "There's also a soul to this country. And it's the soul of this country that is what makes many of us fall in love with it and leaves many of us, even though things are not necessarily easy here at this point, but leaves us wanting to continue to live here and hoping that our children and grandchildren will live here and wanting to see this through to the better days that I firmly believe are ahead and will make themselves manifest." I'm deeply, deeply worried, frightened for Israel on a number of areas. But also, I am so inspired by the points of light, and I want to share one of them with you today. So, Gordis interviews Ilana Sacks, and I'm going to focus first on one project, and then I'm going to show you how it's actually much broader, much wider. So this woman, Ilana Sacks, grew up in Riverdale, New York. She went to SAR, she went to Ramaz, she went to Barnard, which is part of Columbia, and then she made Aliyah. And when she came to Israel, she was teaching Tanakh. She was teaching Torah in different places, and actually, she is known as an excellent Torah teacher. And then, a few years into it, she continued teaching, but she also started working in a bakery, and she was baking in a bakery. And then COVID came, and she lost her job at the bakery, and someone sent her a WhatsApp of a help wanted, and it is to be the coordinator of a bakery in a place called Sadnat Shiluv. I'll translate that soon. And it was close to where she lives because she lives in Efrat, and this is near Efrat. And the person who sent it to her said, "This looks like it would be a good fit for you." And so she got the job, and the job is coordinating the bakery. And the bakery provides baked goods for a cafe in Gvaot. Gvaot is a small yishuv near Efrat. And the bakery supplies the baked goods for a cafe in Gvaot, as well as food for some of the residents. And that's where she works. Now, Gvaot is an incredible place because it was founded as an integrated yishuv, meaning it was to be integrated with people with special needs and people with less obvious needs. And at the heart of the yishuv is the program where she works, which is called Sadnat Shiluv, which means like integration project or integration workshop. So, first she tells the story of how Sadnat Shiluv began. And it began with a woman named Noah Mandelbaum, and she was a ganenet. She was a nursery school teacher nearby. And at that time, she was a nursery school teacher, and there was a boy in her class, and he was 9 years old. So remember, it's a nursery school, and he's 9 years old. And he is a boy with Down syndrome. But he was in this gan, in this nursery, because he was not doing well anywhere else. He tried other places, it wasn't working, he wasn't behaving, he was disruptive, there was a little bit of violence, not very verbal. And the only place he could be that accepted him was this gan, which of course is not the appropriate place for a 9-year-old boy, but he's there. So this woman, this teacher, Noah, decided that she was going to work with him this year. And over the course of the school year, she worked with him, and he managed to become extremely well-functioning. His behavior was good. He was much more verbal. He was able to be the kind of person that he was, a complete change from the end of the school year to the beginning. So, but a 9-year-old boy, now almost 10 years old, can't stay in gan forever. So she decided that she needs to make a new place. Obviously, the regular school system is not finding a place for someone like Hanan. And basically, she said to Hanan, we're going to go find a place that will accept you and me. And in the beginning, it was just this one boy, Hanan, and then a couple of others. And then this place, which she called Sadnat Shiluv, grew. And as it grew, as the kids who were part of this got older, they added classes. And the longer they were there, the more classes they had to add. First grade, second grade, third grade, going up. And then finally, they had to add a high school. And they have high school, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th, 12th grade. And then they added a tasuka, which means an employment division, to find jobs for these people that they would be able to do. But the idea of the program is that the people who join the program are not meant to be there for a year or two. It's something that, if they choose, and if their families choose, they could be there for the rest of their lives. And so the people with special needs who live in apartments, they are integrated into the yeshuv. And she says one of the loveliest things that I've seen here now for years is the interaction between people with special needs and people with other kinds of needs, what we call so-called normal people, but that's, everyone has certain special needs. And the interaction is completely and totally natural. And I hear a lot of people who live here, they say, okay, so I have a family living on the right side of me, and I have an apartment living on the left side of me, where these people with special needs are. And one time I need flour, and I go to the house on the left side of me and borrow a cup of flour. And the next time I go to the apartment and borrow a cup of flour from them. And it makes no difference. Everyone just works together. Now, in these apartments where people live, there is a rakaz, which means a coordinator. So that's a person that oversees the whole thing for that apartment. It's either 4 to 8 people if there's an emergency or overseeing. And then they have madrichim, counselors, that do the day-to-day working together with them, making sure they're okay, taking care of them. And included in this project or workshop is many different types of activities and work. So there's a bakery, which she runs, Ilana runs. There's a kitchen that provides food. There's a stable with horses where there are lessons. There's a cafe where people work as waiters, and they also work preparing the food, and there's a gan, there's a nursery where people work in the nursery. And again, hear this, and this is so important because I know people here and in the U.S., they worry about this, and it's a terrible, terrible strain. It's a gigantic problem. But listen to this. The plan is these people should be able to live their whole lives there. So, meaning they could live into their 80s and beyond, and there are people who are going to take care of them. And that means it's their home for life, basically. And what it means, and again, this is so incredible, parents can live to 120 with God's help, but they know that when they are no longer there, that someone is going to be caring for their kids, emotionally, physically, medically, in every single way, as long as they live. That's an incredible, incredible project. So Gordis says, it's fascinating to me. The stories you're talking about, Shiluv, integration. So this whole Gvaot community was built with this integration in mind. So he says, how many people build a town with this as the core idea of the town? Think about that for a second. You could say the idea of a town is going to be agricultural. You could say it's going to be religious, or it's going to be artistic, or it's going to be whatever. But at the core of the founding of this idea of the town is to build a place that is based on integration. And that's the first thing he says that I just think is really amazing. It is really amazing. And then the other thing he says, now here is where the focus starts to widen and it becomes just incredible, momentous. The other thing is this meeting of different groups. So in this example, it's people with special needs and people with other kinds of needs. Okay? Integration. So he says, I was actually at a school in the Negev yesterday, he says. It's also a high school, but it's a very different one. It's a high school in which Jews and Bedouin teach side by side. And they're teaching Bedouin teenagers and trying to give them Hebrew and integrate them into Israeli society so they can go on to university and whatever. So it's a very, very different subject, but it is still this idea of Shiluv. It's integration. And he makes a really strong point because most of the Bedouin live in the southern part of Israel. And he says most of these Bedouin kids, they have family in Gaza. They may have at one time lived in Gaza. And they have relatives, grandparents maybe, aunts and uncles, cousins who are in Gaza. And then the Jewish faculty, the Jewish teachers, of course, they all go off to war, back and forth, in reserves, whatever they're called on. And as far as these students are concerned, going off to war for the Israeli teachers in reserves is basically to shoot their family. And then these teachers come back and they say, okay, let's keep studying together. So it's complicated. It's very, very complicated. But these are people whose lives have been devoted to Shiluv, to integration. And somehow they make it work. So this is this idea of Shiluv, integration, in a different area of society. And then others. There are lots of such initiatives all over Israel. For example, there is Mechina. Mechina means the pre-army program. Literally, the word means preparation. The high school that I went to was part of Ner Yisrael, Ner Yisrael Rabbinical College. It was the Mechina of Ner Yisrael. That's what they call the high school. It's preparatory for going on. Okay, but Mechina in Israel is for the IDF, preparing to go into the IDF. So there are lots of different Mechinot. There are some that are religious. There are some that are agricultural because they want people to feel like they fit in. So people with different interests go to different ones. And then there are ones like HaShomer HaChadash, which is one of the Mechinot, and that's about guarding farmlands. And also there are ones for religious and secular people together. So this is another aspect of Israeli society where in preparing for the army, you have this sense of shiluv, of religious and secular, which again is one of the major splits within Israeli society. And there are these organizations and efforts to work on shiluv, on integrating these communities. And then he writes, we think of Israel as such a separated society. You think of the protesters versus the Ben Gvir people or whatever. And of course, that's true, yes. But there is so much about this society where so many people are actually devoting their lives to breaking down those barriers, to breaking down those walls, to not pretend that everyone's the same, but that we're going to learn to live together. And the truth is, we don't hear so much about that. But this is happening across Israel in all kinds of spheres. And it's beautiful. So then he takes the conversation with Ilana to a much wider perspective. And his closing question is, he says to her, you're unbelievably talented, you're gifted, you could be doing a lot of different things, and you're doing this, managing a bakery at this Sadnat Shiluv. What has it done for your soul? Why is it that this is what you've chosen to do? And this is where Ilana shares a couple of ideas that really do apply to all of Israeli society. And it's just, well, you'll decide. So she says, one thing, for example, is I've had a lot of jobs. And a lot of them I've enjoyed. Some more, some less, like any jobs. And one of the things I found hard when she was teaching, and again, she was teaching at a very high level. She was highly respected and she was sought after. She was like a star teacher in the religious world of teaching Torah. One of the things that I found hard, if I'm going to be honest, was that in the teaching world, I felt there was a lot of competition. Can you be a superstar? Can you be that dazzling, bright someone that everyone wants to hire? And that was hard for me, I have to admit. I felt that sometimes I just couldn't come up with it. It's an aspect I didn't enjoy so much. In Sadnat Shiluv, where she works now managing the bakery, you have amazing human beings working there. Sometimes feel like, what am I doing here? How do I rank being among these truly amazing people? And there is no aspect of what I'm doing that it's because I want to get credit, that I want to do this to outshine somebody else. It doesn't exist. And she says, let me give you an example. She said, my husband was looking at a pamphlet that somebody made. And the pamphlet had pictures of wildflowers and identified their name and gave a little information about them. And it was an educational pamphlet because when they take the young people in school on hikes in the nearby area, so they go on a hike and they see a flower or a plant, they can look at the pamphlet and see, oh, this is the name, this is what it's called, this is how it grows. So her husband was looking at this pamphlet. And he says to her, do you know who made this? And she said, I think I know who made it. I think I can guess, but I'm not sure. And he says to her, that is remarkable. He says, you would never find this somewhere else, where it didn't have the name of the person that did it, and the organization that sponsors it, and the philanthropists that are supporting it. You wouldn't find such a thing. Someone did it because there was a need, and that's the way it is in this place, she says. Not because they need to have their name, not because they need the credit. And that's a really lovely place to work, because where you just do, and there are people doing amazing things, and people recognize that you're doing good things also, but there's no need to be constantly talking about it all the time. And that's something that I find is very good for the soul. And again, this kind of thing is going on all throughout society in Israel. And that's why we don't hear about it, because there is this idea of much of society. I'm not saying putting down any good efforts that do publicize and raise funds, and nothing wrong with that. But there are also a lot of things that it's just the culture of the place not to call attention to itself. Then she says another thing. Incredible. She says, the other thing that I get that's good for my soul working here is you have to meet the person as they are. Okay, now, that sounds obvious. But she explains. She says, when I first started working here, I realized, okay, this is going to be really cool. I can talk to them, I can work with them, and of course, my expectations will be within their capabilities. Okay. And that worked for a certain while. And then I found myself at a certain point, I would get frustration because you would try to explain something and they just weren't getting it. And you'd explain it over and over and they just weren't getting it. And of course, that gets very frustrating. And then at a certain point, you realize, okay, they just can't get that one principle, that one detail. They can't get it. There's something there that just isn't clicking for them. And that's when you realize what it means to meet someone where they are, shiluv, to integrate. It doesn't mean treating them like everybody else. It means meeting them where they are. Treating them like the person as they are. And once I made that switch, it was much easier to deal with those things that were getting frustrated, because I said to myself, okay, if something's not going to work, it's not going to work. I don't have to get frustrated about it. And I have to try a different approach. And once you do that, it really is accepting them for what they are. And so that's one thing I think if you're talking about a broader Israeli society, we all talk about we want people to be one big Am Yisrael. And of course, that's extremely important. But it doesn't mean that everyone else is going to start being like me. It means that I have to accept them for what they are and where they are. Some of the things are going to overlap, but not everything is. And I think about that a lot, that what we go through at Sadnat Shiluv in terms of acceptance is true about accepting anyone who's different than you. You're not going to become me. And that's not why I enjoy working with you or having a relationship with you. I enjoy working with you. I enjoy having a relationship with you because I understand you now, that you are not me, and we can figure this out. We can work together, even if your way of thinking about something isn't the way that I think about something. And Gordis says, that's really what we need here in Israel. to meet each other where we are, to understand that we don't have to make them into us, whoever the them and the us is, in every sphere of society. And we're not going to become them. We have to learn to make this work together. And especially now, because it's tough times in Israel. There's a lot of ugliness in the air, he writes, a lot of ugliness in the news, a lot of ugliness in the streets, and there's certainly horror going on across the border, meaning in Gaza. And then he says to hear about these, he says, not pockets, but they're nuclei all over society of just pure goodness, of wanting to help other people, of building a yeshuv around this idea, about someone like you had a really amazing career in education, and you go ahead and you do this with your life. This is what makes Israel, Israel. And it's the thing that is very hard for me to imagine happening in a lot of other places, maybe any other place except for Israel. And it's just one of those things that gives me hope and a sense of belief in Am Yisrael and what the people of this country can actually do. I'm highlighting just one of these amazing projects. But they are happening throughout Israel in every sphere of society. And we have to make it our business to learn about them, as much as they don't try to get our attention. But we have to learn about them, because they are the future and the hope of Israel. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.